going to continue in our Jesus Is series. Today, the title of our sermon is Jesus is a King. And I know that kind of sounds almost blasphemous. Aren't we supposed to say Jesus is the King? But I want you to just think for a moment around the fact that there are actually kings, and there were kings, and Jesus was beside kings. And so the reality is that term is something that can be used for a lot of different things. And Jesus is, for sure, a king. The question is he your king? Because he is a king, and he is the king forever, and yet so often he is not the one who rules our lives. But we're gonna read out of John 18. We're gonna go John 18:28 through 19:16, and I feel somewhat guilty at times for the last couple, because we're gonna go through a lot of verses and not cover them, all of them. But we're just gonna have to follow God's leading in this. So John 18:28 through 19:16. Starting in verse 28, says, "Then they brought Jesus from Caiaphas into the praetorium." Now, who's they? They is this the Sanhedrin, this council that had convened. Remember, it was that Mickey Mouse court that they had, and they had Roman soldiers with them, and they brought Jesus from Caiaphas before the high priest. Now they're bringing him to the Roman proconsul, who is Pilate. And it was early, and they themselves did not enter the praetorium, so they would not be defiled, but might eat the Passover. A very interesting note how the Jews really were being very holy while trying to kill somebody. But there you go. Therefore Pilate came out to them and said, "What accusation are you bringing against this man?" Now, Pilate is standing in his position, is the one who is standing on behalf of the Roman government for the Jewish people. Normally not even there, usually on the coast in his nice place, but because of the Passover and the chances for things to be riotous and whatnot, he's actually closer to Jerusalem for this. So they're bringing Jesus to essentially the judge and the jury of this region. Okay, they answered and said to him, "If this man were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you." So Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him according to your law." The Jews said to him, "We are not permitted to put anyone to death." This happened so that the word of Jesus, which he said, indicating what kind of death he was going to die, would be fulfilled. Therefore Pilate entered the praetorium again and summoned Jesus and said to him, "You are the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Are you saying this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate answered, "I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done?" And Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would be fighting so that I would not be handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not of this realm." Therefore Pilate said to him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say correctly that I am a king. For this purpose I have been born, and for this I have come into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" And after saying this, he came out again to the Jews and said to them, "I find no grounds at all for charges in his case. However, you have a custom that I release one prisoner for you at the Passover. Therefore, do you wish that I release for you the king of the Jews?" So they shouted again, saying, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a rebel. So Pilate then took Jesus and had him flogged, and the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and placed it on his head, and put on a purple cloak. And they repeatedly came up to him and said, "Hail, King of the Jews," and slapped him in the face again and again. And then Pilate came out again and said to them, "See, I am bringing him out so that you will know that I find no grounds at all for charges in this case. I don't think we should crucify Jesus today," essentially is what he's saying to them. Jesus then came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, and Pilate said, "And behold the man." So when the chief priests and the officers saw him, they shouted, saying, "Crucify, crucify." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no grounds for charges in his case." The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and by that law he ought to die, because he made himself out to be the Son of God." Therefore, when Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid, and he entered the praetorium again and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. So Pilate said to him, "Are you not speaking to me? Do you not know that I have authority to release you, and I have authority to crucify you?" And Jesus answered him, "You would have no authority over me at all if it had not been given to you from above. For this reason, the one who handed me over to you has the greater sin." As a result of this, Pilate made efforts to release him, But the Jews shouted, saying, "If you release this man, you are not a friend of Caesar. Everyone who makes himself out to be a king opposes Caesar." Therefore, when Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat at a place called the Pavement, but in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation for the Passover. It was about the 6th hour, and he said to the Jews, "Look, your king." So they shouted, "Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king except Caesar." So he then handed him over to them to be crucified. Like I said, I spent many, it feels like I lived a month and a week on this one, going all these different places. And right now in front of you, I am simply going to submit all of that and just pray that God does his work. Because I'm not going to concentrate on the Jews today. I'm going to concentrate on Pilate. There's always a bit of a concern when I do this. I think that's the logical, theological, kind of like, student part of me doesn't want to turn it into this moralizing story. But the reality is what God wants us to understand today, I think, is that every day, brothers and sisters, we are Pilate. Every day we make the choices of whether or not, once again, we will do the things that would require Christ's death. And we do it from this place of like this, I would say it's like this pretend authority. Pastor John said it in the past, like we sit as kings and queens, and it's a privileged position in our society and in our culture to feel as though, right, we don't have to answer to anybody. And we really have authority over our lives. There's an additional reality as Christians where we feel like we have this authority, right? We conquer Satan, we conquer demons, we do all these things because of this great thing that Christ has done for us. And so we sit in this position, right, of really being the judge and the jury of our own lives and making decisions every day without having to consult with anybody. Decisions every day about whether or not the choices that we'll make and the directions that we will go will either honor Jesus Christ as king or require, once again, that the king die. And that's what I think today we're going to need to wrestle through. So in verses 29 through 31, it says, this is interesting because I want you to see Pilate at this point. He's kind of flexing his I'm in charge muscles here. All right? He's flexing these muscles about how, he can kind of do whatever he wants because he's Pilate, right? Just like we often can do whatever we want because, well, as I would say sometimes to my wife when she tells me things I shouldn't do, I'm a grown man. I can do what I want. Therefore, Pilate came out to them and said, "What accusation are you bringing against this man?" They answered him and said, "If this man were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you." Okay, this is the part we can't miss, okay? Who went with the chief priests, or not the chief priest's guard, who went with them to get Jesus? Do you remember? Was it just them? Who else went? Romans, all right? We're like, I don't know. The only answer I know in church is Jesus. No, the Romans went, they had a Roman cohort with them, right? Now, where would they have gotten that? Where would they have gotten that cohort from? Who would have had to give them that cohort? Pilate, Pilates, this guy, right? So he has to give them, like you have to understand it when you read it, you go, oh, I understand why they're saying what they're saying. So he says to them, "What accusation are you bringing against this man?" After he already gave them troops to go arrest somebody that they said was a criminal, and he already, just by sending those troops out, said, okay. And then they said to him, if this man were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you. Like, you knew what we were doing. Like, why are you asking that? So Pilate looks at them and he says, I'll tell you what. Take him yourselves, judge him according to your law, knowing fair well that they really can't do anything without him. So he's just letting them be reminded of his authority here. And they said, and we are not permitted to put anyone to death. All right, now, I was thinking about this even today, and I was thinking about how, we sit in this place of privilege often, not just because of the society that we live in, but because of the things that Jesus has done for us. For him who has been set free is free indeed, right? And so we sit in this place where we're kind of like out there. But you know what? Every once in a while, we kind of send out these search signals. Like Pilate should never have sent that cohort out, right? Should never even have done it, but he did, right? And now it's like, whoa, I didn't want to kill a guy. I don't know why you're here. I don't know what you're doing here. Take this away from me. But in fact, he invited this confrontation. And let me help you see it maybe from this way. I did a little Google search. Now, I don't know why all my ads look like this. Why you keep bringing this to my doorstep? I mean, I'm free. Like I just sent out a little search, and then I don't know why all these things are here. I really don't. Right? It happens with our thoughts too, right? Like we wait for this thought about this thing, and then I just squish it, right? I squish it, and then I don't understand why all these other things are coming at me. Well, I sent this search party out, thinking about whether or not I should crucify Jesus today. Now, I'm just saying it that way because that's what sin is. You understand that, right? All sin is unrighteousness, and the only way we enter into the presence of God is if we are fully righteous, and the only way for that to happen is for Jesus Christ to cover our sins. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, this is gospel 101. So when I say we have to send out this search party to decide whether or not we should crucify Jesus today, it's really when sin starts to mess with us, when temptation starts to come. And you can look at this however you want, but people are going to bring these things to your door. And you're going to have to decide at that moment what you're going to do with it. And Pilate plays with it too much, right? Like, I'm autonomous. Whoa, I'm not bound by that. God, you've been free indeed. Listen, you can put that out there in front of me, but I got control here. I got control over this, right? So he's in this place where he feels like he kind of has to prove that he has control of the situation. Have you ever been there? Oh, no, I got control of this. It's okay. I got this. No big deal. Right now, even though I'm kind of playing with this thing, I have the power to set Jesus on the throne as king, and I have the power to send him towards the cross. I still have all of that power. Like, we play this in our minds like somehow we really do have this great choice. Like somehow we really are the one that can make this decision. And that's what Pilate's doing here, right? You can't judge me, right? I can do what I want. Don't judge me. Only God can judge me, right? No kings in my country. I do whatever I want. I don't have to conform to your expectations. All of this stuff that we can say, right? Right? Oh, well, how do you know? Oh, well, the Bible doesn't say it's a sin. All these things that we say, right? These kind of self-righteous things that we say. And so they had come like expecting that Pilate's going to confirm all things, and instead he starts to, kind of do his strut. Nope, I'm in charge still. And so then he goes into this risk assessment. And when I say this, he's kind of trying to decide whether or not Jesus is a threat to what he wants. So you're going to go into this risk assessment. It sounds like he's doing it really for the country and everything, but he's really doing it for himself. Again, we have to really see this. A lot of times we have these really big things that we say, I'm doing this for Jesus, I'm doing this for my family, but really, honestly, we're doing it because we want to just not be changed, not be disturbed, not be uncomfortable, not have to pay a price. And so we're always doing these risk assessments like, if I don't make this choice, what does that do in my relationships and all of this? And so now he's got a relationship with Rome. He's got a relationship with the Jews. He's got to figure out how he's going to navigate all of this. So in 33-37 says, therefore Pilate entered the praetorium again, summoned Jesus, and said to him, you are the king of the Jews? And Jesus answered, are you saying this on your own? Or did others tell you about me? And Pilate answered, well, I'm not a Jew. Stop, I don't know, your own nation, the chief priest handed you over to you. What have you done? And we ask this question, I think, sometimes in our own heads, okay, to what extent does Jesus have to be the king of my life? And Jesus answered, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would be fighting so that I would not be handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not of this realm. This is very powerful. My kingdom is not of this world. Now, for Pilate, this is great. He hears this and he goes, he wants nothing to do with my life. Right? This is all some other thing. He's some philosopher king who's talking about these things that, are down the road. My life currently, Jesus' kingship in this other world, this Jesus' eternal kingship over in heaven, once all this stuff is done, that's really not a threat to my current position. So it's this thing that's happening here. But what we have to understand when Jesus says this is he really is saying that he's not concerned with us having earthly victory and stuff. His kingdom is not wrapped up in this. He's declaring something very interesting here. So I'll get back to that in a second. So we'll finish just to verse 37 here. Therefore Pilate said to him, so you are a king? And Jesus answered, you say correctly that I am a king. For this purpose I have been born, and for this I have come into the world to testify to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. And so Jesus is saying, I am a king. I am the true king. He doesn't say it explicitly like that. And Pilate hears, oh, good. You can be a king, and I can still have other kings, and it's all good. There's lots of kings. And you're one of them, but your kingship doesn't mess with my life. What is this a risk to me, right? To what I want to do going forward, right? What risk does Jesus pose? And Jesus says, well, listen, I'm not the king of the Jews. It's interesting that he says this. This is a very telling statement, actually, and I'll just take a little minor caveat for a second. He says that his kingdom, if it were for this world, would be fighting against the Jews. It says it right there. My servants would be fighting so that I would not be handed over to the Jews. It's not so much about the Jewish people here. It is about the fact that Jesus is saying, I'm not for a nation. And what I am establishing is something beyond this world, and you are all way too focused on the world. And it doesn't matter. If it mattered, if your earthly kingdom mattered, I would have already taken it. But something bigger has to happen. There is a greater war happening right now. And he is in line to be a part of that by dying on the cross and taking victory forever for an eternal kingdom that is not of this world. But Jesus is not the king of the Jews. Jesus is not a national figure. His kingdom is not of this world. He's not fighting for Israel. He's not fighting Rome. He's only fighting for the eternal kingdom and for God's will to be done. It's why when we say that we stand with America or we stand with Trump or we stand with whatever or we stand with Israel or we stand and we use all of our stuff to align God with nations, we miss what Jesus is saying. He is saying, I fight for the will of God to be done. I think we have to start saying, I stand with Jesus. And I also wonder about this idea of Jesus is saying, that's not my battle. And I wonder how many battles we're calling Jesus into that he really has no care for at all. Right? Like, we're pulling him on all these flesh and blood battles, and he's like, bro, your thing is bigger than this. Your battle's not against flesh and blood. It's against principalities and powers. Would you see bigger than all of this? I know you really want the house with the blue door, but give me a break. That blue door will fade. I am offering you something that never will. Oh, God, I'm calling you into my battle so I can be comfortable today. And he's like, man, I'm fighting a battle so you can be safe forever. But Pilate comes to this assessment at the end of it is that, listen, there's really no threat. I can allow Jesus to continue to be a king because he's not really threatening what I want. It's not costing me anything. So I just let him be king. And I think that's where a lot of us sit. Because we have a misunderstanding of Jesus and we put him beside other kings. And we are like, listen, Jesus is the king of my salvation and my future. And then I have the kings of the present, which is my comfort, my desire. Do you understand what I'm saying, right? So long as I can keep you side by side, we're good. I still love Jesus. He's my king forever, right? And I got other stuff to do. So now Pilate's like, okay, I got to figure this out. Like, these guys have to lay off Jesus, okay? Because he's not really a threat to me, so I'm going to tell you to lay off Jesus. So he's going to help the Jews save face, essentially, is what he's going to do. That's what he's decided, and I think sometimes we miss what he's doing. He's going to help the Jews save face so that they can say, yeah, see, he was bad, and then Pilate can keep him as a king and around, and he doesn't have to crucify him, right? So he is going to help the Jews save face, and eventually he's going to do it by reducing Jesus to their level. And I'll show you what I mean. Pilate said to him in verse 38, to Jesus, what is the truth? So Pilate's like, whatever, dude. What is the truth? You know, there's lots of truth. This is a statement we could hear today. Like, Jesus says, people who know, like, if I'm your king, you follow me, you know I'm the truth. Paul's like, what's truth? But what's truth? Anyways. And it's like a dismissive thing. And he goes out to the Jews, because he's already come to, listen, I find no grounds at all for charges in his case. He doesn't mess with me at all. Let him be, right? However, you have a custom that I release one prisoner for you at the Passover. Therefore, do you wish that I release for you the king of the Jews? Now, he is saying this. He's going, listen, hey, he's a criminal, right? Now, you get it on record. I can let him go. You can kind of take this back before you look foolish for trying to prosecute a person who's not guilty. Like, let's just listen. Let's just agree. You know, that I see Jesus a certain way and you see Jesus a certain way. And let's just go forward this way, right? Because my Jesus is not the king of the Jews. My Jesus is just the king of some ethereal kingdom that's going to happen at some point. But like, you don't even have to acknowledge his kingship. Just leave him be. And they shouted, saying, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a rebel. I'm sorry, I want to leave the Jews alone in this story, but they're like wanting to crucify Jesus because they're afraid that he's going to start a rebellion, and then the Romans are going to come. So instead, they say, release somebody who starts rebellions. Anyways, these are just the moments I read these things and go, what is this all about? But this is the can't we just all get along stage. You know, let's say all my desires and my comforts and how you see Jesus, and we can just all still be friends, and even though you don't have the same intentions as I do, like, let's just all be together. And they're like, no, so Pastor, what am I going to do? I tell you what I got to do. I got to get Jesus off his high horse. I got to make Jesus more like the people. I got to make him, you know, I got to make Jesus feel real feeble and humble and non-threatening, right? I got to make a non-threatening Jesus. So he's no longer a threat to these people. And then I don't have to crucify him, and he can remain king, and I can have my position, and this works out pretty good. So all I got to do is make everybody be like okay with this watered down, beat down Jesus. So Pilate then took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and placed it on his head and put on a purple cloak. And they repeatedly came up to him and said, "Hail, King of the Jews," and slapped him in the face again and again. And then Pilate came out again and said to them, to the Jewish people, "See, look, I'm bringing him out to you so that you will know that I find no grounds at all for charges in this case. I think he can be like king of his magical kingdom. I really do. And so I just want you guys to know that. I think you should let him be king of his magical kingdom too. And Jesus then came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, which was put on him to mock him. He's bleeding, right? Like, what kind of king is this really? And Pilate said to him, behold the man. This is the man you're scared of? This is the guy you think's going to cause problems? Look at him. He can barely stand. He's a joke. Come on. He's no threat to you. He's not going to make you change anything. Just let him be. Let him be. So when the chief priests and officers saw him, they shouted, no, no, no. Crucify, crucify. And this is where these things get. I don't think you understand. It's why when things start, they have to finish, right? The longer we play with whether or not we should crucify Jesus, the worse and harder it gets. The cries to crucify him become louder, and our flesh demands it. And Pilate said to them, fine, then take him for yourself and crucify him, for I find no grounds for charges. He wants to wash his hands. This is not my fault. I got nothing to do with this. Y'all the devil made me do it. He's trying to find a way for everybody to get what they want. Right? Jesus doesn't have to be offensive. There's room for lots of kings and queens here. Okay? So, see, look, he's gentle, he's lammy. He gives you all the grace you need to just be who you want. He just loves you just the way you are. No expectations. He's a big softy. Look at him. He's that lamb that was slain. Like, he can't even walk. Somebody else got to carry his cross. Like, he's nothing. He's not a threat to me or you or our ways of life. Now, what happens in this moment is Pilate then, he gets spooked by something. And it's ironic because they've put this crown of thorns on him. Do you understand? I think sometimes we just think, this crown of thorns, they put it on him because they just wanted to brutalize him. Well, the chances are that some of those thorns did touch his brow and cause him to bleed, but that really wasn't the purpose for what they were doing. So have you ever seen these images? I should have found one of these god kings, and they have this radiant crown that goes out. So they've made this really mocking crown, this is the god king. Look at him with this big thing going on, and but he's pathetic, right? They think it's funny. And then something happens. After they tell Pilate to crucify him, they say this. They double down. Listen, Pilate, we have a law in verse 7. And by that law he ought to die because he made himself out to be the Son of God. Now remember what I just said. They mockingly made him a God-man king and beat him. Okay. Therefore, when Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. Have you ever asked yourself, what was he afraid of? And he entered the praetorium again and said to Jesus, where are you from? He goes, I just mocked this guy as some God king. Now they're saying he's a son of a God. He's not asking him if he's from Galilee. He's asking him, are you from heaven? What he's terrified about is that maybe he shouldn't have reduced Jesus. He's getting this conviction that maybe Jesus actually shouldn't have to go through this conviction that maybe actually he is a king that I have to respect, and that maybe it really is a threat, and I'm feeling all of a sudden like I am a sinner. See, to this Greek Roman audience, what Pilate would have been brought up in his culture, it wouldn't have been this blasphemy that the Jews were saying it was. To him, that wouldn't have been a thing. Because there are many gods. And there are sons of gods. I mean, Hercules, Achilles. We know these people. We know these stories, these man, God, kings, and heroes. So to him, it makes him this, is he one of these divine men with divine powers? If he really is the Son of God, the fear that he's feeling is, oh no. And the reason this word malin, right, it has this greater force that would have said something like this. When he heard this, he was very much afraid. Is Jesus more than what I have been reducing him to? That moment where we recognize that what we are doing has a consequence and the real judge is Jesus. Wait a second, right? Wait. Is Jesus for real? Like, is Jesus for real in all that he says and all that he expects? This is the point. Remember, this is the point. Where we get to that point of going, yeah, but Jesus is this, he's a lamb and he's gracious. Could he really expect me to do this? Every time I hear those words, I know it's already done, just so you know, by the way. I don't know how many times, Josh, I heard you preaching about this. God can't really expect us to, not look at pornography, right? I mean, everybody does do it, right? Can't expect us not to. Every time I hear that, I already know. You sent out a search party. You sat with an audience, and you've already determined that your desires and Jesus can both be king. And the conviction of the high expectation. Is hell actually real? Have I actually misrepresented and disrespected Jesus in all this? These are the things he's wrestling with in this moment. Have I reduced him to this loving, bail-paying philanthropist that just takes people's garbage and their sin because that's what he does? And so Pilate goes to Jesus and he's like, you got to help me out, bro. Where are you from? And instead of getting this answer, he gets humbled. In verse 10, it says, so Pilate said to Jesus, to him, are you not speaking to me? Give me the silent treatment now. How many times I've heard this? God's not even talking because he already talked, bro. He already told you he's king. He already told you he has expectations. He already told you that it's sin. He already told you that going down this path. Why is he going to tell you now? He says, do you not know that I have authority to release you and I have authority to crucify you? And brothers and sisters, don't we all? And Jesus answered him and said, you would have no authority over me at all if it had not been given to you from above. Brothers and sisters, we would not have the freedom to choose not to sin if it was not for Jesus' sacrifice in the first place. We would have zero authority. He says, for this reason, the one who handed me over to you has the greater sin. Now, he's not excusing Pilate's sin. He's acknowledging that he's been led into temptation, and we have a tempter. But it doesn't absolve him of his choice. In the end, right, the only authority that he has is given to him to accomplish God's will. Every earthly authority, brothers and sisters, is granted by God so that his will be done. Just so that we understand that. It doesn't mean that every earthly authority is godly. We get that mixed up a lot. But at the end of the day, the only real authority Pilate has, period, end of discussion, the only real authority, this king, this autonomous king who can play like sin ain't that big of a deal and make all these choices and believe, the only real thing he can do, the only authority he really has is to choose a king. In this moment, That's the authority he has. He has the authority to choose that Jesus is king and to keep him from the cross, or he has the choice to choose something else. But each and every one of us in this world and in this room, day in and day out, only have that authority. Whom will I serve? What will I serve? That's it. And so Pilate chooses a king. In verse 12 it says, as a result of this, Pilate made efforts to release him. I don't want to crucify Jesus, I really don't. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do it. Let's just, I'm getting out of this. I'm not going to do it, right? Some of y'all have never, all of you all are addicts. You don't say you are. You say, you leave that to those who have substance problems, but you're all addicts. You're all people who have perpetually sinned. But those of us who are in that addict world, this process right here is very real. What's happening right here is very real because we stare it in the face and we recognize, oh, I got all the way here and I've kind of played this thing like maybe I can do both things a little bit and I know Christ set me free from that addiction and I don't have to do that. But remember when, and I send out this search party and then it comes back in and then I play around and I move Jesus over a little bit and then I say, no, those are my friends. I'm going to be with my friends and you cannot love Jesus and I can love Jesus and then we're all in this place together, and I'm compromising, and I'm pushing him down. But no, I don't have to do this. 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 I'm just going to leave. I don't have to do this. I don't have to do this. I don't have to do this. And then the confrontation happens. The Jews shouted, saying, if you release this man, you are not a friend of Caesar. Everyone who makes himself out to be a king opposes Caesar. Pilate, whom do you fear? Do you fear the king who holds the world in his hands? Or do you fear the king who can mess up your current situation? Therefore, when Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out, sat down on the pavement, called the pavement, but in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation, and he said to the Jews, look, your king. So they shouted, away with him, crucify him. Pilate said to them, shall I crucify your king? The chief priest answered, we have no king except Caesar. So he then handed him over to them to be crucified. If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Listen, Pilate had every reason to be super scared at that point. I don't know if you know this, but he's kind of on thin ice already. He's pulled some stuff that not everybody in Rome is happy about. He knows that his position is kind of wonky. And this isn't a position that just gets taken from you and you get demoted. This is a position that gets taken from you and you die. So now he's looking at this and he's going, listen, if I allow Jesus to be king, if I don't crucify Jesus, I'm going to lose all the things that are important to me in this moment. See, this is what it really comes down to. Pilate chooses now. Pilate chooses now. Like Esau chose soup, Pilate chooses now. He's caught between the fear of God and the fear of man. He acknowledges that Jesus must be something more than what he thinks he is. He acknowledges that he's played with something. But all of this, at the end of the day, puts him in a position. I either have to choose my fear of what I'm not going to have now or my fear of what I might not have later. I choose now. And honestly, he's not choosing Caesar as his king. He's not choosing the Jews like as his king and the ones that are dictating what he does. He is choosing his own man-made kingdom. He's choosing now. He is choosing the known. He is choosing the world. And daily, brothers and sisters, we are brought to this final point and we're asked a question. Will we allow Jesus to be king, or will we be led by our fear of what we won't have right now? See, our kings, they don't end up being people. We think that they are, and we think that we're king, but that's not what's happening. Fear is our king. Envy is our king. Greed is our king. Desire, lust are our kings. Hunger is our king. And we bow to now, forsaking the future and choosing a king that cannot save. I'm just going to read these verses out of Revelation, and I'm going to close. Revelation 11:15. Then the seventh angel sounded, and there were loud voices in heaven saying, "The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, and he will reign forever and ever." Do not misunderstand or misrepresent Jesus to others or to yourself. You may think you are winning now. He wins forever. You may envy those who have this world and its authority now, but he will have it forever. Revelation 19:11. And I saw this lammy, soft pushover Jesus. And heaven was opened. And behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it is called Faithful and True. And in righteousness he judges and wages war. His eyes are a flame of fire, and on his head are many crowns. And he has a name written on him, which no one knows except himself. He is clothed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. And the armies which are in heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, were following him on white horses. From his mouth comes a sharp sword, so that with it he may strike down the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron, and he treads the winepress of the fierce wrath of God the Almighty. And on his robe and on his thigh he has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. This is the true King. Revelation 19:19. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies assembled to make war against him who sat on the horse and against his army. The reason I'm saying this is just so you know, I'll give you the end. Jesus wins. But when the time comes and when it matters, Jesus fights for his people and for his kingdom. And every other thing that would cause you to fear will bow at his name. Revelation 21. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth passed away, and there is no longer any sea. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is among the people. And he will dwell among them, and they shall be his people, and God himself will be among them. And he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. And there will be no longer be any death, and there will no longer be any mourning, or crying, or pain. The first things have passed away. And all of the kings that we choose day in and day out, these kings of fear and desire, these kings of pain, how often do we bow before our pain and administer our medications? Because we need something now. Because we have devalued the cost and the preciousness of the kingdom of God. We have traded wiping away our tears for a moment. Sorry, we've traded wiping away our tears forever to do it for a moment, for an instant, to gratify something in us, and to give away our heart and our authority to a king that has no right to sit on the throne of our lives. Today, I want to ask you, who really is your king? What really is your king? What is causing you to make the choices that you're making, to go the places that you're going, to do the things that you are doing? Is it the holy, sovereign, forever King, Jesus? Or is it these earthly, demanding, powerless, mortal, defiant